right, here he is, the great Mike Tramp, of course, of White Lion. Mike, how you doing?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm doing just fine.
You're where are you at right now? I would imagine you're in Denmark.
I am all the way on the other side of the world in a little country called Denmark, where I was born and raised till I was about 17, and then I packed my bags and rode into the sunset.
I was
the sunset faded.
I was reading something online. I don't know how true it is, but you were like a teen idol or something back in the day, right?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to just be a normal teenager and sort of just find my ways about life before I joined the music business. So I mean, I came straight into a professional band already at age 15 and a half. Completely unprepared and completely without wanting to pursue that kind of road, that kind of career. But one thing for sure is that from the day I stepped in to the band and the house these three guys 10 years older than me was living in, and I left school, asked my mom if I could drop out of school, I took it deadly serious, and I signed a deal with someone, I don't know, had horns, cloven hoofs, tails, angel wings, I don't know, but 46, almost 47 years later, and it's sort of like been the only thing that I've sort of done and lived off. Not that I'm not capable of doing many other things, but I've been completely committed to that ever since.
Well, let's talk about this new album that you have coming out, Songs of White Lion Volume 2, which comes out on August 23rd, which, as the title suggests, not so much re-recordings, but a lot of this is really reimaginings of White Lion classics, very similar to Volume 1. And, with the first one containing most of White Lion's biggest hits, like Wait, When the Children Cry, all that stuff, when it comes time to do the second one, Volume 2, and I guess even with the first one as well, outside of the hits, how do you decide which White Lion songs that you want to go back to re-record and reimagine in this modern era?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and it's also a great observation because, I mean, it's sort of how I felt myself. I think that with the first album, it was obvious that there were songs that I could not keep off. It would not make sense to do an album without Wait, Little Fighter, Tell Me, When the Children Cry, it's Lady of the Valley, etc., etc. And I've been honest in the previous interviews that I've done that I never foresaw that I was going to do a volume 2. When I think back why I did the first one, I think it just sort of was that for the last sort of 25 years, which have been my solo career, 14 solo albums of very specific style of who I am as a solo artist. Obviously not a great success on a business scale, but to me, a triumph of my songwriting and persistence. When it came to do this album, it was almost like I wanted this monkey off my back that had followed me everywhere I went. The concert poster would be half White Lion and half Mike Tramp. And, especially when I was doing solo shows, I would add songs. It would be my own interpretations of songs that I wrote close to 40 years ago and things like that, but never any plan of stepping back in and being, what I once was. But it knocked on my window so hard that I had to find a way to sort of, huck that gigantic grizzly bear that was chasing me in my dreams. And once I decided to do this and found a way around it, it almost like it relieved me of a lot of like thoughts and stress that now I heard these songs done today, but close to original versions. At the same time, also a man at that time, 61 years old, singing the songs that he wrote when he was 23. And that would, of course, continue with the second album. There, I would then go deeper into, because there's a lot of bands that they dream of having a hit, and the second they have the hit, they say, "Oh man, we don't want to play the song no more. We want to play the long album tracks." And it was like that for us too. We constantly wanted to get away from what we were known for, and then play longer songs, jam into extended versions, and so on. So obviously, when it came to Volume 2, certain songs had to be revisited, like Lights and Thunder, like El Salvador, which I wrote in 1980 when I was living in Spain before I even came to America. Stuff like that.
Well, a real quick sidebar to piggyback off of something that you said. I was reading an interview last night with Vito that I think he did last year, and he had said that I think it was Lady of the Valley, that was really how White Lion would have been like, overall, is similar to that song if you guys didn't have people in your ear at the time, pushing you to write these hits and all that kind of stuff. Do you agree with that? Is there any truth to that? That, Lady of the Valley, that the sound of that would have been, is a little more in line with the original idea for White Lion?
Well, I tell you what, even though I'm sitting here in a hoodie and it's summer, it gives me goosebumps hearing that Vito, obviously I speak to Vito quite often, but that Vito speaks those words, which are exactly my words. It was one of the things that he and I, as the songwriters and the founders of the band, were unanimous in, deciding on. We never had a single feud about any songs that we wrote. And like you said, or repeating what he said, we obviously started out in the early 80s looking at some of the bands that inspired us. I think they probably more inspired us of being part of this movement that was now going to be the 80s. It's not so much the songs or the sounds and stuff like that. And we got in and we got inspired by how people suddenly now were allowed to dress and all that stuff. But when we sat down as songwriters, I think that my European background and some of the classic rock bands, Queen, Thin Lizzy, UFO, Rainbow, but also a lot of Elton John, and the same thing with Vito came out there. And towards the end of the band, Vito's and my plan were always to take the band much more in the direction of Journey, Kansas, Styx, maybe even a little bit of Rush or something like that, in our own way, and of course with my vocal and his guitar. But we wanted to let the songs be our driver, our chauffeur that would take us down the road. We wouldn't want the image, the hair, the clothes, the videos to be the catalyst of what White Lion was going to be. But obviously, we were in the middle of everything else that was happening at that time. And it was very, very, very difficult to take a stand outside. Who the hell wants to be Kurt Cobain in 1985? When Motley Crue's #1 on MTV and everything looks great, even though Kurt Cobain, of course, didn't exist at that time. It's just that nobody wanted to step out of sort of what felt very comfortable and very successful to a lot of bands. And I think that probably most bands, one way or another, would tell similar stories, maybe not necessarily about the songwriting we were talking about, but just this thing that, be careful what you wish for. You might get it, and then when you get it, you want to sort of run away for it, or at least you want to make sure that it's not controlling you, that you're not allowed to step outside. And that's maybe one of the bad side of at least of 80s rock and roll, that the next album is going to sound like the previous album, because that's sort of what the record company tells us that the fans want. So you're not going to be going in there being Peter Gabriel or experiment with stuff like that. No, you're going to try to repeat your success, but that's also impossible because you don't want to sit and write the same song.
Well, before we get back to the new record, talking about your European background and your voice with Vito's guitar and all that, I think a lot of the time when people look back on the legacy of White Lion, Vito is the one that gets a lot of the praise because his guitar playing is next level and deservedly so, and plays a key role in the sound of the band. But I would also argue, and I really am not just saying this, that you are one of the great underrated singers from that time as well, because I just feel like your voice, especially when you compare it to, Vince Neil and whoever else from the 80s, it's just extremely unique. And I remember hearing When the Children Cry when I was a kid, and Little Fighter and all that stuff. And just, I think it is like the European background and the accent. And like, I don't know, it's always been incredible to me, the way that some of the words that you enunciate in the songs, it's very interesting to me, and not something that I've heard before. And I think plays a lot bigger role in the sound of White Lion than people give you credit for.
Well, I mean, I truly appreciate that you say those things, and I hope that you have the same feeling when you hear these reverb versions, because this, at many times, I'm kind of going to start backwards. It's almost like I went out on a journey with those songs, and now the journey is sort of in reality completed, and now I come back and tell you the true story about the songs, not just in the lyrical format, but also in the maturity of what the voice have now become. Because when I sat down with Vito first time, when we wrote Broken Heart and the Road to Valhalla on the first album in early 1983, was also the first time that I opened the door to those vocal cords like that. I had never done that before, really. The previous recordings that I'd done with my bands before I came on had not even gotten to that. I don't know if you would call level or that place, but it's sort of like what Vito allowed me with his guitar parts and inspired me to do became what it was. I never in reality knew what I was going to be. So many of the things that you sort of just pointed out there with the European background, with the way, I sort of like pronounce some of the words, but also my lyrical ideas is not necessarily that I have thought about it, but it's just what's natural for me. And you mentioned other singers and stuff like that. All these guys were friends of mine back in the 80s when we met on tours together. So like we all kind of looked at each other and said, "Damn, we're lucky. We made it, man. So let's have a good time now." So it wasn't so much there was any competition and stuff like that. And then we all sort of like, respected each other for having, their sound or whatever. But when I look at it now, is that earlier on, and especially as White Lion was recording the final album, and I already from the first to that one could hear that I had already matured and changed, and I felt like a calling of the wild, wanting me to go somewhere else. I had to follow what felt natural. I've never gone out and sung a song that I couldn't. And I followed that along from when I went from White Lion to Freak of Nature and went to my solo albums. I simply just listened and sang what felt right. And as I was going into my solo albums, I sort of, in reality, returned to who Mike Tramp is as a solo artist. Even when I came to America, I was raised on folk music. My backgrounds are, growing up with Dylan, Neil Young, later on Springsteen, Tom Petty, and heroes, great songwriters and artists like Ryan Adams, stuff like that. That's who I am as a songwriter and as a solo artist. But to many people, I'm the guy from MTV with the long blonde hair, in the 80s videos. That is, for example, the difference between Vince Neil and me. There's many other differences. Is in many ways, he's still shout at the devil. And I had to follow my calling, and I could not go up on stage and try to repeat or recreate a 27-year-old young man, jumping around and having the energy of 10 boxes of Red Bull or something like that.
Well, and I think a lot of times whenever a band goes in and they re-record their hits, it always sort of elicits a bit of an eye roll, like, wow, what's the fucking point of this? But it often feels like super half-assed and lazy. But being truthful here, that's really not the case in this scenario. Even the songs from Volume 2 and from the first one, that some of them are quite a bit different than their original, and some are very similar. But there's something about the whole Songs of White Lion project as a whole that it feels honest. It doesn't feel forced. I guess in a nutshell, it sounds and feels organic. And some of the songs even sound very modern, very 2024, hard rock songs. So I think it really is a great thing. Well,
I mean, I that wasn't the plan, but that's obviously what came out when you heard that the songs in itself, and that also the credit both to Vito and myself is we wrote these songs without an elevating drum rise or fire on stage. We wrote these songs like Lennon and McCartney went in to write songs for the Beatles. We wrote them as a song that somebody could sit on a bench with acoustic guitar and play back. Then they became the sound of White Lion on the albums and on the live show, and now sort of refurbished in 2024. I mean, if I couldn't come up with anything better to say, I would almost say, well, I've re-recorded these songs so I could stand listening to them myself. Because the sound of the Pride, regardless if there are fans that treasure these albums, is not the sound that I can listen to today. Those production and the sound of me there is looking at a class, school picture for me. And I need to have, and usually when people look at a school picture, they laugh, because that's how you look back then, and you had braces and whatever it is. But it's a natural progress of life that you can't keep holding on just to memories and then try to bring the memories alive without maybe doing a little bit of touch-up or Botox or stretching the picture or whatever it is. It's just a natural thing. But rock and roll, for some reason, compared to anything, especially sports, when you reach a certain age, you get taken off the field and you open a car dealership. Rock and roll is carte blanche. There's no expiration date. It's almost as worse as that guy calling himself the U.S. president.
Well, I would agree that there's a few bands out there from the same era that should probably be moving on or doing re-recordings, because truthfully, you still sound great, but like you keep saying, these songs are 35, 40 years old or whatever, and I mean, you're a much different singer now. I think there's a quote from you in the press release about this where you said something like you understand your voice now way better than you did in your 20s. And so anybody that's going to see you live on this upcoming tour, I mean, this is also how the songs will sound is what's on these new, Songs of White Lion albums, not, people showing up expecting to hear what they heard in 1983.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, the fans can just go out in the bathroom and look at themselves and then pick up a picture of themselves when they were 30 years younger. And everybody, why isn't anything? I mean, and it wasn't in the press release, but my quote is almost like so there's been sort of like a hiatus for 30 years of Indiana Jones. Then Harrison Ford comes back as Indiana Jones, and the director and the movie studio is about to decide, how do we want Indiana to come back? Do we want to show it like he hasn't aged, or do we want to rewrite the movie like, he's pulled out of retirement and, he can't jump as far, his back hurts when he gets up in the morning, and make it a great movie? Or do we have to bring in 20, stunt person to do something that nobody in the theater is going to believe? So, I mean, I have most of the records in my massive collection of most of the bands I toured and played with and stuff like that. And they were all great records. And I don't personally enjoy watching some of those bands, having to add, tracks behind them to reproduce the younger version of themselves, because I don't honestly think that the fans want them to be that. So, but that's what the business has obviously done. And, there were some drastic things over the last year of 3 of the biggest rock acts on earth. And now it's been documented on YouTube and they cannot run away from it. I wouldn't want to go to sleep living with that. And I can tell you, I need every dollar I make on stage, but still I wouldn't go out there having to come home and watch that. I'm definitely not on top at every show, and I'm definitely not the world's greatest singer, but what I go out and do is what I'm capable of. And I don't hide it.
Well, and I think that honesty is very admirable. And truthfully, I mean, it's the way that some of these songs have been done now, even though some of them sound a little bit different, they still sound great, but almost like a new song. And I think that's just a very admirable quality about, your honesty, because a lot of these guys can't get over the fact that, that maybe they're not, playing arenas or stadiums anymore, or they don't sound like they once did, or they don't look like they once did. But, here you are in 2024 fucking killing it.
Well, I'll tell you what, when I went out on my first U.S. tour as a solo act in 2013, which was an acoustic guitar in a rental car, I told myself, most of the place you're playing doesn't have a backstage entrance, which means you got to get through the front entrance, up through the audience, up on stage, after the stage, down through the audience to the table in the corner where you open a suitcase and sell your albums and T-shirts. If you make that part of the show, if you embrace that, if you let the audience into your life, everybody's going to feel they're in the most natural place. And what it did was just, I already were that kind of person, but I had to reassure myself that was this tour was going to be about. That don't go out and build everything around something that it can't be. What if it doesn't have that? What if it doesn't have, can I still do the show? I says, well, in reality, I can play in a pizzeria with a acoustic guitar in the corner. So if I can do that, there really ain't any place I can't play. And so you have to adapt, improvise, overcome the situation, because there ain't no other choice.
Well, and to that point, do you ever feel like White Lion is sort of a curse? You know, I know you said before about, you know, the angel and the devil on your shoulders telling you both, are both telling you different things to do, and but you frequently have returned to White Lion over the years, whether it's songs of White Lion or anything in the past. And obviously you experienced great success with that band, and it's really given you a lifelong career in some ways. But on the flip side, you've released a ton of solo albums over the years, quite a bit different than White Lion, Freaks of Nature, all that kind of stuff. And it feels to me like a big part of you wants to have a solo career that is separate from White Lion, but that also maybe you feel chained to White Lion, because it can be very difficult for fans especially to separate somebody from what they're known for originally. And so in a way, people almost get trapped by whatever it is that brought them attention and stardom and all that stuff, but they want to do different things. But it's always the original thing is always casting a shadow.
Oh, you're 100% right. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this here if my solo career had taken off. Saying that, I mean, I'm releasing a new English solo album next year, but I do that because I write the songs and I want to do it. And obviously I'm not going to tour the world on it. Another little sort of funny story, but also very, very just straight to the point, is like, last year, I was together with Marcus. We'd been over playing in England, and we come through Germany, and we were just stopping at a hotel. And as we park in the car, we see some sort of like goth kind of like fans or rock, something like, they definitely didn't look like football fans, standing at something like, and talking to somebody outside the hotel. And I went, I wonder who that is. And then later on in the bar, where Marcus and I sitting there having a beer, and then this guy comes out. He's got like black hair. Look, then that's resemblance of he might have been in a band. And to make a long story short, he ends up being the first Jason in Friday the 13th, at the end of the movie, that comes out of the water. And since that day, that is what he has lived off, going around to all kind of horror conventions around the world and just saying, well, you might not recognize me, but I'm the first Jason from Friday the 13th. So yes, I have a solo career, and it's the rock and roll that I like, and to write. I also would not write a new style White Lion album. It would be impossible for me to do. My heart and soul wouldn't be in it. But at the same time, God has given me something that people enjoy. So it's in reality sort of my duty to embrace it and give it back, which is why I came to the conclusion of, let me refurbish and bring these songs into current time. And at the same time, with how I go on stage, how I talk to the audience, how I look, and everything fits like we're all here right now, and the past is the past.
Real quick, the guy that played the Jason, I believe his name's Ari Lehman or something like that.
It's exactly who he is.
Yeah, and he's also got a band called First Jason.
Yeah, of course.
So he definitely plays into that. There's a record. I live in the middle of nowhere, but there's a record store out here that they bring him every year for an appearance, and the place gets packed, and I'm just like, wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, that's what he does. He does not go up in the morning and work at Walmart.
Yeah. Oh, good for him. One last thing on this album, then I want to get to the tour real quick, because I know we're running out of time. But with whether it's Volume 2 or Volume 1, was there ever any discussion about maybe having any classic White Lion members, whether it's Vito or James LoMenzo or anything, just to even do a guest appearance on one of the songs on either of these albums, or was that never even a thought?
Well, no, it wasn't even a thought. Vito would never happen. I have the highest respect for Vito, what he has chosen to basically retire from that. And the only problem there is it hasn't really been 100% confirmed, even though I basically confirm it, that he has no interest of re-entering that world. James LoMenzo, who has a great gig in Megadeth playing bass. Him and I are best friends. And we talk at the time. I didn't want this album to be anything to do sort of with the past, except for the songs and the name. And I wanted sort of it to have it under control, that it was going to be exactly what it was going to be.
Well, the new
That's not to say anything will happen in the future.
Hey, well, we'll definitely stay tuned for that. The album comes out on August 23rd, which coincidentally, I believe the tour starts the exact same day over here in the U.S., and you're going to be here for quite a while. I think it runs till October 25th, and then back to Europe with the Dead Daisies and Visto Blanco, which I think Visto Blanco, that's Alice Cooper's daughter, is in that band, right?
Yep. Yes, we're just out there working. It's the only thing AI cannot replace is us on stage.
Well, not yet. All these, maybe there'll be some White Lion avatars at some point down the road, though, huh?
Well, then we'll make sure to go out and suck.
After 40 years on the road, do you still get excited to go out and tour? I mean, I see your tour dates all the time. I mean, you're always out there doing stuff. Do you still get excited to go out on the road, or is it something that's like, well, I just did this record, I guess I better go out and support it, or do you still enjoy touring?
Well, here's another revelation, another little secret is that from the day I joined my first band, and that first band already had its own PA and light system and a truck, I fell in love with everything that's behind the stage. And I'm not talking about the girls, but I'm talking about the building of the stage, the PA system. So I have a big fascination of how things work. And the thing about me going on stage is something that I at times almost can do with my eyes closed. I know it so well, because I'm just me. I don't have to think about what I'm going to be or stuff like that. So these days when we tour, for me, it's another road trip of exploration, antique malls, visiting all kinds of stuff that's just in front of you that you wouldn't see back home and stuff like that. So I make the road interesting in that way, and going as far away from rock and roll and saving all that energy for the 2 hours on stage and the half hour after the show when I meet the fans.
Well, one last thing, I saw a post on your Facebook about being available for private house shows, and that concept has always fascinated me because especially having the status that you had back in the day and having these lifelong fans and stuff. I don't know, the idea of going to a stranger's house to play songs just terrifies me, but I assume you enjoy doing it or you wouldn't do that. But that would that would terrify me.
It would only terrify me if they stood there with shotguns and locked the door and says you ain't leaving.
I remember I was talking with Brian Vander Ark of the Verve Pipe a few years ago, and he was doing that a bunch back in the day, and he said he had a great time, and he also he said he was making a killing doing it. People pay good money, but it would still just freak me out.
Yeah, and we're doing it. I mean, I've done many of those things with the acoustic guitar. We're doing it full band because we're carrying a full digital system. So in reality, we can almost hook up straight into your stereo and not even make any more noise than if you just had a couple of friends over playing. So there were just a couple of dates along the road that we would like to fill because we're doing a lot of driving. So we wanted to throw it out. Who knows? Maybe the next tour will be all in your living room concerts. Who knows?
Well, make sure you check out the new album, Songs of White Lion Volume 2, when it comes out on August 23rd, with the tour starting the very same day. Dates and info at MikeTrampOfficial.com. Mike, thanks so much for coming on and taking some time, man. I appreciate it, and would love to have you back on and get into some other things, Freaks in Nature and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, man, you got it. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the interview. You had some good stuff to ask me about and talk about, so I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's been an honor to talk to you, and hope to see you out on the road.
You got it, brother. Take care.